really just sold a pen. What people go to craft shows to buy is the story. It's going to be what you did to that pen. How did you get that pen? The CA finish that's on the pen, the casting that you did on the pen, the fact that it's snakeskin, the fact that it's bleached or that it's colored. That's what people are buying. They're buying the story because that's what they want to pass on. And I know that there are going to be other pen turners in here, and the beauty of asking a pen turner about the way that they do their work is you could put 25 different pen turners in one group and you ask them how do you do something, you're going to get 28 answers. You're going to get more answers for how you turn this pen or what you do to a pen than the way that people actually, than there are people in the room. So is the camera on?
You're on.
All right.
Don't worry.
So remember, the most important thing that I want you to remember is that camera right now is adding 15 pounds to me. Right? I am a lot thinner, and now that we got two cameras, that's 30 pounds that they're adding on to me. I'm a lot thinner in real
You
life.
don't look like a symphony.
That's okay, we're only showing your face.
All right. Still, there's 30 pounds that we just added to my face. So, I'm going to try to go through everything that there is to know. So some of it's going to be kind of basic, and we're going to start kind of basic. But then as we progress, we're going to go all the way up into how to make my favorite pen. This is a Mickey Mouse watch pen where all the gears are taken out of it. It's an antique Mickey Mouse watch that was there. We're going to talk about casting. We're going to talk about all that. So really, as I said, it's conversation. So ask your questions that you want. I'm going to demo acrylics. And I got a different way of turning acrylics than you've probably seen. I think most people turn wood and then they try to do the same technique on an acrylic and you get chatter all across that acrylic. I'm going to show you how not to turn that way. So you're going to get ribbons coming across it. If I turn it real well, you're going to get it to stripe out and you're going to get ribbons and you're going to get something that's easy, sandable, and done. And as I said, we're just going to go through all this stuff. We're going to talk about working with alternatives. We're going to talk about casting, and then we're going to do also the steampunk Mickey Mouse, which I'll actually pass around. So you know, steampunk is really popular, so that's the industrial antique, kind of dirty. So this is a pen that I did when I went out to Orlando last year with my daughter. She collects the pennies, the copper pennies. So I bought a couple extra copper pennies, and I'll go through exactly how I make, all the steps that I do to make this as we go around. So the biggest thing is when you're first starting out is choosing a blank. And as I said, it's going to start a little bit basic, but I'm going to tell you the easiest thing to turn when you're turning a pen is not softwood. I think everybody thinks that you're going to turn softwood and that's the easiest way to do it. Hardwoods are a lot easier. And the thing that I really suggest turning is maple. It's a great one to practice on because the grain is real easy, it sands out real easy. So I would always start with a hardwood. And one of the things that people will talk about is when you drill. And you'll see that people blow out the bottoms of a blank. The easiest way not to blow out the bottom of a blank is
Drill it short and cut it off.
Drill it short and cut it off. So what I wind up doing is I set my drill press, and as I said, I do arguably, as I said, 300 to 400 pens, so I will do a production mode on it. And so I've got my jig that I've got, as you can see in the picture. I set up my drill press to cut about 1/16 of an inch shy of getting all the way through the bottom. I'll typically use a brad point bit so that I'll get just a little bit of a nick in the bottom of it so I know that I'm done all the way through. And then I'll take it over to my bandsaw and I'll clip it when I'm done. So the most important thing too is when you start out with a blank is I always put a witness mark on my blanks. As you can see, this is a blank that I got here. I know where I'm going to cut it. And then I got two little witness marks on it. So when I put it back up on my lathe, I'll always get the grain to match up. I want to make sure that that's just one of those subtle things. I think someone was looking at some of these pens and they were commenting about the subtlety of how things perfectly line up. And that's the difference. That's when you go to a pen show or when you go to sell the piece, it's a lot easier when you can talk about those little subtleties, that everything matches up and that everything lines up. So I always use a jig. This is wood pen turning, so I always glue everything in with 5-minute epoxy. So you know, you can use super glue. I find that if anybody's ever used super glue, tell me that you've never gotten a pen brass tube halfway in and had it stick. Right? You have, right? Yep, I've had it and I get the thing to go in halfway and I stick it And so the easiest way to do, if you ever have that, really what I do is I wind up clipping the brass tube and then putting it in on the other side, and as long as they're the right depth, you're going to be fine. But as I said, 5-minute epoxy I've never had a problem with. So one of the things that I will do is that I'll cut them all one night, I'll drill them all one night, I'll glue them all one night, and then I'll let them sit. So at my house, as I said, I've probably got about 50 pens ready to go, sitting on a table, and I've got the table all marked out, which ones are slim lines and the way that I go.
Can you actually mix up 5-minute epoxy and get them all?
Yeah, I mix up 5-minute epoxy and I do about 10 in a batch, and then I've got a whole bunch of ceramic tiles, and then I just use the quadrants of the ceramic tile, and then I'll mix up the next bit of 5-minute epoxy. I'll glue in the blanks, and then I'll turn my ceramic tile and I'll chunk them off. So finishing the ends on wooden pens, I use a pen mill. So I, unfortunately, it was the last thing I was looking for here, and I didn't bring my pen mill. But it's a piece of metal that I mill it on. I'm going to talk about that because when I do acrylics, I never use a pen mill. I always sand when I'm doing acrylics, and I got my jig that I'll show you how I do acrylics. But if you're doing a wooden pen, the easiest way to get it to finish off is to actually use a pen mill.
Why don't you use the pen mill and acrylic?
I'll explain it, but the biggest reason is that the acrylic will have a much better tendency to chip out. And if you do it when I do it in a sanding mode, I can get it to work a lot easier, and I get a lot cleaner cut when I'm doing it on the sanding mode. So that's just why I do it. And it's, as I said, there's 27 other reasons why you'd want to use them. That's just the reason I do. So cheap commercial, as I said earlier. I buy predominantly almost 90% of my stuff from Rossio myself. So Rich is such a nice guy. He gives me such a great deal on this stuff. I get everything typically that way. So the most important thing when you're doing when you're turning a pen is a sharp tool is a must. And when I'm using and I'm doing wood, the grind that I do on all my wood is a 55-degree grind. So, and I do a different grind when I'm doing acrylic. I use a 40-degree grind. And I'll keep saying I'm going to show you and promise you I'm going to show you why. But if you think about, if anybody here has done flat work and you're ever on a table saw, there's a different blade for everything. I know most of us just put a general purpose blade in and we push a little harder on the table saw if we have to cut something. But there's a rip blade, there's a crosscut blade, there's a melamine blade, right? There's a blade for plywood, even bandsaws have the same thing. It's the same thing with turning and turning tools. So to use one turning tool to do everything, at some point I'm going to be compromising it. So I find that because when I'm doing wood, I am, as your board says here, I'm always anchoring, I'm beveling, and I'm cutting. I'm finding my bevel on a piece of wood. The 55-degree tool is perfect for that. When we're doing acrylic, I don't rub the bevel, and we're not going to rub the bevel. We're going to just cut it straight off and we're going to slice it. So that's important. The other thing is anybody else here use these, the carbide tip turning tools? They're phenomenal turning tools. Here's the only thing that I'll tell you is, and this is a joke on all Woodturners, and I'm one also, we're probably the most frugal guys that you know. And one of the things that they sell these things on is that they never have to be sharpened. That doesn't mean that you don't ever have to turn this knob.
Replaced.
Yep, and most people will just keep cutting and cutting and cutting with this in this position because they're frugal and they don't want to turn to the next position. So while it's nice to be frugal and these tools have a great place in turning, just make sure that if you are going to go this route, that you actually sharpen it by turning this tool the way it goes. And one of the things I put on here, when I was doing Atlanta, and there was a lot of people who are kind of beginning and even beginning turners there. So one of the things that I want to point out is when you go, and I'm not going to turn the wood because I think you're gonna find that it's a lot of technique that you already know. But one of the things that you got to remember, especially when you're doing any spindle turning, I think the tendency for anybody who wants to do any turning, when they come up into here, especially new turners, they lock this down, and their first thing is they line this all up and they think they got to push into the piece, and that's not the way you do any turning. The pressure on anything is never into the piece of wood, right? it's always side to side. So my technique when I'm doing the acrylics, it's going to be the same thing. The tool is going to be handled where you want it. The pressure is never going to be into the piece. The pressure always goes side to side, never in, right? And then the other thing is, I'll rough cut it. This one's cut down to the side. And then what we're going to do is what we call round the edges. So, sorry. So when we're turning a piece of wood, and you see it up here, I've rounded this down, right? Has anybody ever chipped out the edges on a pen?
Yeah.
All right. The reason that I find that you chip out the edges because you think you're going to continue. This one's going to be a little bit of a challenge here because
Extend this out.
yeah, I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to pull this thing all the way out. Give me 1 second. So when you're here and you're turning, are we back on? So when you're turning, you get down to the edge. And remember, wood's got grain and it's got layers, right? It's got a layer of hardwood. Everything is going on. It's moving. So you typically chip it out when you get to the edge, and you keep trying to make those flat cuts. And when I do the acrylic plank, we're going to go over here. But notice what I do. I get the pen down to where I want it, right? And then I round the edges in, and this is an over dramatic drawing of the picture. But I'll come in here, I'll find my edges, and I'll pull it back. I'll find this edge, kind of like here, and I'll pull it back. And that's how I get the edges to round over. Oh, thank you. So the tool will come in here, I'll find my edge, and then I'll pull it back. And I'll do this when we're doing the acrylic. I'll find my edge here, and then I'll pull it back when I'm pulling it back. What that gets me is now, as you can see, this one's a little bit over dramatic and it's rounded, right? But now when I'm going to make my straight cuts across it to get it perfectly flush with the bushing, there's no chance that that's going to tear out. Because I've had support when I started it here and I'm moving in, even though half of the time I'm cutting up grain, right? I'm cutting up. I still have something supported. I got some wood behind it when I'm turning here and I'm moving in, and then when I come over here and I'm turning and I'm moving in, I always have wood behind it supporting it. And so then that way I'm not going to get those chip outs when I get to the end, and especially the chip outs that go underneath your bushing. I've had that before, and then I just realized, you know what? Don't keep making those straight cuts. The nice thing about it is you can get down to where I want it to be, and then I can, I tell people who first start, if you're first starting pen turning, I think the most common thing that people do is they try to do a slim line. And I actually think slim lines are harder to do than a cigar pen. Do a cigar pen. Cigar pen's got more girth to it. And a cigar pen, just for those of you who are looking, is something more like this. Right? So when you look at it, there's, on the inside, there's more, slim line is like a 1/16 of an inch, maybe a little bit more. These, you're getting closer to, 3/16, maybe even almost 1/4 of an inch of material that you got when you're doing the inside of these things. And it's just a lot easier to start out on a cigar pen. So when we're talking about that, that's the way you want to go. So if you want to flip back, so working the ends, sand, I use different, so even when I'm doing wood, we're going to talk about all the different ways you can finish wood. So as I said, wood is always easier to start with, right? Because it turns easier, right? Wood sands a lot easier versus acrylic, right? And when it comes wood versus acrylic, when it comes to finishing, guess what? Acrylic is a lot easier to finish than wood. So you get two of the benefits of learning how to do it on wood, but when you actually get to go to do the finishing on wood, to me, wood is a lot harder to finish than acrylic. When we get down to sanding, and we're going to talk a little bit about different sanding techniques, I typically use the super glue finish on all my wood pens, and I'll do the same thing that I'll use micro mesh on there. When you micro mesh them, you'll start out, you'll turn the lathe on. I'll rotate every other grit. We'll go radial or tangential, right? So I'm sanding it as the lathe is on. Then I shut it off and I take the next grit and I go across. then I take the next grit and I go around tangential, then I take the next grit and I go across. And I actually, when you're using the micro mesh,
Mark, do you soak them in water?
not for anything on woods. On acrylics, I do. On acrylic, I'll soak them in water. On wood, I don't soak them in water. And believe it or not, I'm an engineer in real life, so I have to stay between the lines my entire life, except when I get to go out and go and make a pen. But one of the engineering things that I do is even on my micro mesh, everything is marked on the back end of what the grit's gonna be. And when I'm sanding a light wood, I use the top of the micro mesh. When I'm sanding a dark wood, I use the bottom of the micro mesh. And it actually is really important because if you keep sanding if you take a dark wood and you sand with micro mesh that you haven't cleaned and you use the light side, it's gonna get in the grain and you will see it. And same thing too, if you take the dark and I wanna sand a piece of maple like this, and I use the dark side of the wood, you'll actually see the dark from the last time that you do it. So I don't clean them every single time. So I'll clean them every 10th, 15th pen. And a lot of times I'll just throw them right in a lot of times, I'll be honest, I throw them in a sock and then throw them in the same washer and dryer, and they clean up just fine. If not, I'll just put them in water and I'll clean them all off.
So why don't you use the wet ones for wood?
When I'm doing the why don't I wet it when I'm doing the super glue finish? Is what you're saying? I've never had a need to. I find that the super glue finishes work just fine. And I do have a little bit of a concern is, and some people actually, I sand the outside. So when I'm doing most of my pens, it's really important to me. I won't sell anything that doesn't look perfect to me. And guess what happens to those pens? They become demo pens. And so a lot of these pens are not necessarily perfect, but I use them for my demos. But I will take the time of pulling this off and I'll sand the edges of both sides of these. But when it's a wood pen, I don't ever finish the inside edges of them. So I do have a concern that the water would go up into there, and that's why I don't do it. It's just maybe, no matter how many coats of super glue that I've put on here, I do have a little bit of a concern of swelling up the wood when I'm going to do that, something like that. So on acrylic, yeah, an acrylic though, we're going to get to that also. I'll wet the first probably 5 or 6, and then I'll continue to dry sand it, but the moisture will pick up on there in the way that we go. So we've talked about this, so we're not going to go through this one. So in terms of, we're going to start actually doing some fun stuff. So in terms of actually doing a pen and starting out, any questions so far? Any comments? There's other professional wood pen turners in here. Have I done everything the kind of the way you guys do it?
You do it a little different, but everyone does it different.
So, yeah, and the biggest thing that I do at my house is I use cookie sheets. So I'll take cookie sheets out, I'll line up all my pens on the cookie sheets, and then I'll take them to the bandsaw and I'll cut them, and then I'll put them back on the cookie sheet, then I'll take them over to my drill. So, as I said, one of the things that to me is really important is differentiating your work. And so what I typically like to do is, this is a piece of maple. And to be honest with you, this piece of maple probably cost me $0.25. Right, I bought a maple board. It's 3/4 inch maple board. I cut the maple board. So I'm into this pen blank for about $0.25. And so I'll go to shows and I'll look at other people's work. And I always invite people to come over and look at mine. I'll answer any questions that they have, and I'll ask any questions that I have about the way that you do things. But to get to the point that I made earlier is people will look at this and they'll go, it's a piece of maple. Yeah. And so what I want to do is I want to differentiate this. So we're going to color this piece. And then mix this up. So every day I drink 2 or 3 Snapples. These Snapple bottles are great.
Just don't drink the dye.
Yeah. Or the next one we're going to use bleach. So we don't want to drink the bleach. So this is not going to get as dark as I wanted it because this is a very hard piece of maple. But I just want to get a little bit of a base coat on here to kind of it gets into the grain, and I don't know if you could even see already. The pen lit up a little bit. You can see a little bit more of the grain, right? I don't know if you can see it when it's in there. But the black is not the fun part. It's the color. So these are, the black is trans tint in denatured alcohol. This is, and I'm gonna do it where I want myself to. This is Craft Supplies USA, and it's just another coloring. So I don't know if you can see that. And I'm going to pass this one around. I got a whole board stuff. Go ahead.
Did you sand it on the blank before you did the
Yeah, this blank has already been down sanded.
what size grid did you finish?
I went all the way through all my micro mesh. So
Micro mesh?
yeah, I micro meshed this all the way down.
Does the micro mesh seal the grain on your wood from your?
No, you know what? I thought the exact same thing, and it turns out that it really didn't. So there's now I've done something different. I've now made that clearly red, and we'll actually finish this piece off. I'm not going to go through all.
What was the first coat you put on there?
I just used a little black. Trans tint and denatured alcohol gives me a little bit of black, and you'll see when I pass this around, it makes some of the grain pop a little bit. So some of the grain will be a little bit darker than the other part of the grain. So
Indian ink would be the same.
Indian ink works the same, and if it gets too dark, then I would use 400 grit sandpaper and I'd just knock the black off. So we'll turn this up a little. So I just want to put a finish coat on here. I'm only going to put 2 coats of super glue on it. I'm going to get to my super glue finish in a minute. But I want to give you something that you can see within a couple seconds.
You start with thin.
Yeah, and I only use thin basically. I rarely use thick or medium. Just gonna let it dry.
You don't use accelerator?
No, I never use accelerator. And once again, this is just reasons why. I'm sure that other people use accelerator. I find that the accelerator makes it look yellow after a while. The accelerator turns yellow. There's no doubt about it to me. So
with the medium, it tends to frost it.
So you'll see in here when I pass this one around, there's some streaks in here. I would obviously sand this down, and I'm going to talk about my finishing technique on wood. But what I really wanted to show you is that I could take literally a quarter. Oh, good point. Good point. Excellent point. So, if you use a mandrel saver, most people will use a mandrel saver and just push it in like that, so you don't need to have the nut on there. I use the nut on there, and it's because when I'm doing my acrylic technique, I'm going to put a lot more pressure on it. But the mandrel saver still is important to me, because if I used a point, if I used a live center, a point, that's still going to it'll press the mandrel and have a potential to turn it. Even though I'm using the mandrel saver, I can now use a lot less pressure on there, and that now I've got it still so that mandrel can spin inside there. So people ask that all the time. Do you really need to use the mandrel saver? The answer is no. Do I need to use the nut on there? No, the answer is no. Do I use it? Yeah, I do. I use it. So I'm going to try to knock off just a little bit of some of the marks on here, but I'm not gonna kill myself, because I want to get this around now and start talking about other techniques. That's about all I know.
Using sanding micro mesh?
Yep. I do. You can use normal, you can use normal to get it out, to start it. So as I said, I'm not real worried about the exact finish on here, but I just wanted to show you the idea of coloring.
You start at 1500?
With the micro mesh?
What you're saying?
Yes. Well, actually, okay, so let me go back. So if there's anything that I do want to clean up on it, I will use, on acrylics, I will use 400 grit, wet, dry, wet. On wood, I will use 400 wet, dry if I need to clean something up, and then I'll go right into my micro mesh. I rarely have to start with anything much higher than that. Any other questions?
Gotta put a cover seam around it first.
So can we go back? So the next thing we'll talk about, once again, something to differentiate. This is a great story. Actually, sorry, Tom, can we go back to the... The next two pens that I'm going to hand around, this is, the official pronunciation, believe it or not, is Wengi. It looks like Wenge when you buy it at a store, but it's Wengi. So this is brown, it's chocolate, right? This is this exact same blank right next to it. And I'm going to pass these around. And what do? We're going to do it right now. I'm going to bleach it. So here's the two pens. These are two pens out of the exact same bag for the way I got it. So here we go. We'll see how long this takes. So here's a piece of Wengi in its natural chocolate state. And all I'm going to do is, this is literally Clorox bleach. I will just throw it in there. And hopefully, within about half hour, it's going to bleach out to that color. And so, you can see a dramatic difference in it.
How
Once
long
again,
ago did you turn that one? The one that you bleached?
how long ago did I turn it?
Yeah.
That one actually was at my last demo, so about a month ago. So it sits in, I usually let it sit in the bleach about half hour, 45 minutes. Then I will take it out and I will let it dry because it now is absorbed. So I'll let that sit out a couple nights. I turn it down like I did this one, down to the final dimension. Then I throw it in the bleach. And then what I wind up doing is I'll let it sit outside afterwards, maybe a couple days to let the bleach dry back out. And then I'll put it back on my mandrel and I'll have to knock some of it off. Just sand it down a little bit back to where I want it. But that's not going to sand out. And hopefully, you guys will get to see the huge color variations. This one's already starting to turn colors.
So is the penetration of the bleach about 32nd of an inch? Or?
It's a good question. I've never actually cut one down to find out what it goes
If you
up to.
cut through the bleach?
Yeah. I've never cut through the bleach on that, but as I said, at that point I'm not cutting anymore. I'm just down to doing my sanding.
Woods do you use bleach?
Great question. And if you give me 30 seconds, I'm going to go to my next slide and I'm going to talk about that.
Ready?
Yep.
While he's doing that, I'm afraid this cable's gonna knock your pens over.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about it, but I appreciate that one.
We got it all.
So the other stuff that you can do, so when you ask the question about what other woods do I bleach, Wengi is a great one to bleach. Black palm is a great one to bleach. And this is going to go around in about 3 minutes. This is black palm, and you don't have to worry about it. You can get that on camera for a split second. So this is black palm, and it's a great one to bleach. And this one that's on this board is something that I bleached. It looks antique. It's got this antique gray look to it, and it's just a bleached piece of wood. When this board goes all the way around to the back, I'm going to ask you guys, I want you to guess what kind of wood this is. So the gray one that looks antiqued, I want to know what you guys think it is. And on this board also, there's a better piece of colored wood on there. This is the dyed with a little bit more black in here, and I took a little bit more time to finish it. So it's a little bit more time I did in the finishing compared to the one that I passed around. And then if you've ever seen the double dyed ones, or the ones where they do the box elder and stuff like that, this is the same thing. I can get that effect. by dyeing it and sanding it off. So I dyed this blank purple and then I sanded it off and then I just did my finish on there on top of that. Go ahead.
Before you get too far ahead, when you mentioned the black palm, isn't that a very soft wood? It has to be treated before you commit turn?
No.
Or impregnated in glue or?
No, there's nothing on here. You'll see this when I pass it around. No, the black palm is simply turned the way that it's turned in an all natural state. I don't seal it up with anything. I throw it in the bleach, and this one actually is I think it's a great coloring on here.
Isn't that what just a regular bleach that you use?
Yep, regular Clorox bleach. So my wife asks me all the time, hey, looks like I had more bleach than I had. So I've got a bowl a platter that I'm working on that's wangy, and it's big, and it'll get bleached, and she'll probably lose a whole gallon of bleach at that point. So the other things that you can do is you can do segmenting on the wood. The other thing that's really popular, and I do my own, is half woods, half acrylics. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen these blanks, but it's half wood. Sorry, Tom. This one's half wood, half acrylic. So it's the end of the piece of board that you would normally throw out. And then we put acrylic in there. And when I get to casting, I'm going to talk about that. But here's the end of the board, and I can pass this around. That's the piece that you would normally start with.
That's a piece that normally gets thrown away.
That's the piece that normally gets thrown away, yeah. And so, I'll put it in them. Here, you know what? Pass this around too. We're going to get to this when we get to molding. But this is a mold, and you put it in the mold, cut it up, pour your acrylic in there, and bless you. And that's how you get half wood, half acrylic blanks. So back. It's good to see when I turn that I still have some hair, so I'm happy. So the other thing is if I do use softwood, and I brought that up earlier, is I stabilize all my soft wood. So I've got a pressure pot at home. I've got a vacuum chamber. You do pressure when you're doing casting. You do vacuum when you're doing stabilization. And so this is a piece that I stabilized, and I can go through the entire process for you, but in essence what you do is you put the piece of wood in an oven first, so you get all the moisture out of it. Then I put it in my vacuum chamber. I pour an acrylic over the top of it. I put it in a vacuum for about 3 hours. Then I let it soak after that. I pull the vacuum out. What that does is when you put it in the vacuum, all the moisture that's inside the wood gets evaporated out and pulled out, and then as soon as you shut it off, because they're submersed in acrylic, the acrylic goes back into all the veins and all the capillary action that it's got back there, so that goes in. Then you wrap it in aluminum foil, and you then bake it. And so I'll bake this for maybe about an hour and a half, and then you can see when this comes out, and I'll pass this around, how much, this is a soft piece of spalted, probably tamarind. The nice thing about it is it makes it a lot easier to turn when it's in that state, because it turns a lot more like an acrylic. It makes it a lot easier to finish, because then I don't even have to worry about, my super glue's already got a little bit of that in there because it's acrylic.
Is that cactus juice or is
It's
it?
cactus juice, yep.
Okay.
And so, you know what, let me tell you this. Anybody who wants, anybody wants a copy of my presentation, at the end, just come over and give me your email address, and I'll email you the copy of the presentation. And there's also, if you have any questions about vendors that I use, that's a great point. This is Texas Turn, and I don't get anything out of any of the vendors, but it's a plug for them because I know that I use cactus juice, and I use it out of Texas Turn. So I do that. I do Rich for all my kits, and then when I get into casting, I'll tell you where I get all my stuff to do my casting. So wood finishing, we've talked about this. I do paper to smooth. I dry sand at 400 grit on micro mesh. I finish the ends. I super glue, and then I buff. So the question that everybody has is, when you do a super glue finish on a pen, once again, there's a million different ways of doing it. So what I did for everybody is I'm going to pass this around. This is my storyboard. So tulip wood is in front, which is a very, very easy wood to finish. Cocobolo is in back. Cocobolo, if you've ever tried to work with Cocobolo, it's a very oily wood. It doesn't want to take a finish too well. So I've got a cheat sheet here for you guys. And I tried to finish these pens in every different way so you guys can take a look at all the different ways you can finish a wood pen. So this one is just on a standard BL buffing system, and then I buffed it out. The second one, as I go across here, this is Woodturners finish. And I watched the videos on how they told me to do it, and I did it that way. So I know I know that if I would have put 5 more coats of Woodturners finish on here, it would have been a lot more glossy. But I did it the exact way the manufacturer did it in their videos. Then I've got lacquer, and I sprayed it. So spray lacquer is a real easy way to do it, and we've had a conversation about spray lacquer. So you can take a look at the finish that you get on a spray lacquer. The next one is pen turners finish. And to me, this has got a great dull finish on it. You know, so there's 2 different people that are out there when they're collecting your pens or buying your pens. There are the people who don't mind the car dashboard look, which is the super glue finish that I use. And then the people who like the traditional look on the wood. This pen turners finish looks like it would be a great finish for that one. Then I did polyurethane. Then I did super glue the hard way. And when I say the hard way, this is the way the manufacturer does it. So people ask questions about thin and thick. So this one's got 3 coats of thin on there. And then I did use an accelerator on here because that's the way the manufacturer told me to do it. And then I did 2 coats of medium on here. Then I did 3 coats of thin on here. That's the way they did it. I think it's really hard to do it that way. And take a look at the final way. I do a super glue finish on all my pens also, but I do it a lot easier. I do 3 coats of thin on there, and then I take it off the mandrel and I go put it away. And I let it sit for a day. I might let it sit for 2 days. Then I put it back on my mandrel, and I just use 4/0 steel wool. And I put it on there, and I spin it, and I knock off all the nibs. Then I put 3 more coats of super glue on it, all thin, no accelerator. And I let it sit then for another day. Then I do it the final day. So I do 9 coats of super glue on here. I think the finish on here is a really nice finish on here, and it's a lot easier on me. The accelerator clouds it up, if you ask me. The accelerator makes things turn yellow, if you ask me, so I'm not really pleased with the accelerator. And, you know, there's not a lot of fun in just getting something done real quick. Once again, there's no story to that. So when people are buying the pen and I tell them how much effort is done in doing a super glue finish, that's what they're looking for. That's what I'm looking for. That's the story behind it. And there are great pen turners out there. And if you go on penturners.org, there are people who can do this in 5 minutes and get just a gorgeous finish on it. To me, the fun is actually being able to do something and learn and practice and do it and do it and do it again. So I'm going to pass this around now. And so here's the cheat sheet. It tells you exactly what the different finishes that are on each one of these, how many coats of finish did it take for me to do it, how much time did I spend on my lathe, like the buffing, I did none, how much time I did in the other ones. And then, as I said to the gentleman back there, black palm, the gray is the mystery wood, and here's 2 different colorings just because it filled up my board.
Is the mystery wood cedar?
No.
Try again.
Have you done any of the the natural edge ones with the acrylic pattern out? I have not. I want to do that. I've never done it. Where they, instead of having you press an end on it, you actually just turn the wood all the way around.
Closed end?
Closed end.
Yes. And I got the setup, and it's going to be in here.
Good.
I'll show you how to do that one. So here's some of the things that I want to tell you. So the last slide, what did I say? It's all about practice and the fun. So here's a couple things that I want to tell you. When you're going to do a new technique and you're going to do a super glue technique, it's going to take you 10 times. You're going to have to do it before you even get decent at it. So you know what? You don't have to do it. You don't have to wreck 10 different pens. The coolest thing about doing turning that people who do flat work don't get is I'll turn a pen round and it'll be really proud of the bushings, right? It'll be 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, whatever, proud of my bushings, and I'll put my finish on there. And then I'll sand it off. And then I'll put another finish on there. And I'll try a different finish on there. Then I'll sand it off. The only thing that'll happen, and it's going to happen to you, is you're going to get the perfect finish on there, and then you're going to sand it off, and then when you actually get to the final finish, it's not the perfect finish that you had 4 finishes ago. But I'm telling you, here's what I would tell you. Practice doing it. And then the way I do it is, the way I teach people when they're gonna do a super glue finish on there, is we do it 3 times and then you stop. Then go turn an acrylic pen, go turn something else. It's like anybody who's ever done golfing and you go to the driving range, if you hit 100 balls, you're just tired. By that 100th ball, you're just trying to hopefully hit them all off and get them all done. That's not the way you want to do this. So do it 3 times and then go do something that's more fun. Learn to do something that's more fun. Turn a piece of an acrylic. When you're doing a real blank and you're going to try like the Cocobolo, the other thing I'm going to tell you here is get it quarter round out, get it proud, and then try the finish you're going to do on there. Even though you're a master at doing a super glue finish on there, try it when the thing is still proud so you know that that super glue finish is going to work. Because as I said, you're going to get those exotic woods that are oily and they're not going to take a super glue finish real easy no matter what you do. So that's a good way of practicing it. And there's 2 techniques that I'm going to tell you.
Excuse me, do you wipe them down with the acetone or something?
You can. That's a great point. Sorry, I should bring that up. People will do that. I didn't on any of these because I wanted to do it in their all natural state. You can wipe it down with acetone to get that done. Honestly, I have only found, and you can comment on this also, anybody who's done it, the problem that when I wiped it down with acetone, even though I would kind of let it air dry, that even though I put the finish on there, it wasn't consistent because the acetone got in somewhere in some of the softer wood on the same blank. It faded in there, and then when the super glue went over that, it got dull and cloudy. So I try not to introduce another chemical in there. As I was asked earlier about the black palm, I try to do only 1 chemical on there at a time, and for me the chemical is super glue. So I've tried it, I've done it, I've just never been happy with it, but I'm sure once again there are other people who do it and they're really happy with that finish.
Acetone will also dissolve super glue. So any residue of acetone,
Well, I mean, lacquer thinner, I mean.
it's gonna
Yeah.
melt it. Yeah. That would be the bad one to use.
So 2 times.
Mark,
Sure.
do you use stick fast or tight bond?
All I ever use is stick fast.
Okay.
So it's the, you can get it on the camera, we won't have
It's
to
the Rich
worry about it.
Rossio brand. The Rich Rossio.
It's the Rich Rossio brand that he's got out there, but this stick fast, I tried the other stuff, and you know what, I'll be honest with you, all super glues are not the same. So there's another one that's out there, I know it's real popular. I don't want to say anything bad about it, but
CPH?
I think it's
Tight bond?
Star something.
Star.
Starbond.
Yeah, I have found that it's more like water, and it doesn't give me the finish. I love this stick fast finish, and I only use the thin. And as I said, my technique of doing 3 and then letting it sit overnight and de-nibbing it is just the easiest way of going about doing it.
Have you ever used their brand of, it's C8, they call it C8 pen finish?
No.
I have, and I would never do it again.
Okay.
It seems like it's got more solids in it, and micro mesh won't touch it. It won't remove a layer at all. It just doesn't. It was a big mistake. Now what I had left, I used it to glue my blanks in. But it's just
Super tough super glue?
it's really it's so hard you can remove it with sandpaper, but you can't remove it.
Can't
with
remove
micro
it, yeah. And that's the thing, so that's why, yeah. If it's not on there, I haven't really tried. You know what, when I started, to be honest with you, it was those hot bars.
Oh yeah.
And that was the only thing we could get. You'd have the chocolate bar and the white bar, and you'd burnish the chocolate into it, and then you would do the white bar into it, and it would look good for all of a couple weeks, and then that was the end of it. Oh, you know what? One other thing that I will do, people always ask, I will use some Tripoli wax or Renaissance wax on there. Not that it's going to do anything at all to that finish, because that wipes off so quickly, but what it does do for those of you who do shows is it gives you a couple times of people actually picking that thing up and touching it all up and having no effect on anything. So I'll do that, and I'll finish them all with the Tripoli, or I'll finish them all with, I love Renaissance wax. I think that stuff just looks great. But it's not a long-term finish on there, but it's just enough that's going to get you through a show that people are going to look at it. So, last 2 things on doing my wood is the 2 techniques to improve your finishing. The first one is semi-expensive. It's the BL buffing system. And you can see on the leftmost panel that you got there, that's a pen that's just done with the BL buffing system. It is phenomenal. I buff out every single pen that I do. I buff out my acrylics, I buff out my woods. Once I made the investment in this BL buffing system, it's just great. I traded Rossio's for a lathe head, so I just had an empty head. I built my own stand for it, and I've got my own Beal buffing system on a dead lathe. So that's the more expensive thing.
What speed?
I'm sorry?
What speed?
I try to do around 2,000, 2200 RPMs. And once again, any questions, please ask that. Yeah, I think to me, that's right about the speed that I like it. The buffing, the wheel's not throwing those little hairs out, and that's about the max that I can get before it starts to throw the little hairs out. The other thing that you could do, and this is really, really cheap way to improve your finishing on pens, improve your finishing at all, is buy a garbage can. And put the garbage can right next to your lathe. And this is not a joke, I'm going to tell you the truth. It goes back to that frugalness. If you use 100 grit sandpaper a really long time, it doesn't become 200 grit sandpaper. And if you use 200 grit, it doesn't become 400 grit. It becomes bad. And it becomes sanding that you can't do. And I see chuckles here, so I'm going to guess people overuse that piece of sandpaper. So what you do is take the sandpaper, use it once or twice, and throw it in the garbage. Literally throw it in the garbage. Don't keep putting it up on top of the lathe because you're going to use it again because it doesn't get better. You know, we spend all our time sharpening our tools. Just, you're sharpening your sandpaper. Throw it in the garbage and take another piece out. I factored that all into my costs, but all I'm telling you is putting that garbage can right there made it so much better for me because I used to just sit on my lathe and I'd look and I'd look and I'd look and I'd look and I'd take the piece that I know I shouldn't have taken. So, cheap way of finishing and improving your finishes on
You
it.
ever use the Amaranth?
I love that stuff on doing bowls. I love that stuff for doing flat work. I just don't like it on wood. It just on pens. It just doesn't do anything for me. So I just, once again, all my opinions on it. I know people love that stuff. I love it for bowls. It's great on bowls. I don't like it as much for doing pens. So some of the stuff that you'll see up here and any of this stuff you can come up. I don't know the exact meeting format, so if there's a closing and that you guys do your other section, I'm going to stay here all night till the point that you guys are done, so you can do everything else that you're going to do with your, I assume there's a show and tell.
Oh, you still got some time.
Okay, so when I'm done, I will stay here, so if you want to ask me questions afterwards, look at these pens afterwards, you're more than welcome. I will stay here. But some of the things that we're going to talk, or that you'll see here, is acrylic blanks, apple ester blanks, deer antler, jeans, pasta, mother of pearl. This one is a pure piece of aluminum. I bought this aluminum at Home Depot. So there's the piece of aluminum rod, and there's, I should have cleaned it up. Mother's Polish cleans these things up perfectly. But there's an aluminum pen. So it's just a piece of aluminum rod that I bought at Home Depot, and I made an aluminum pen out of it.
What'd you turn it with?
Normal turning tools.
Really?
Everything done that you see here is all done with normal turning tools. So we talked about half wood, half
You're up
acrylic.
there, Sherry.
We've got snake skins. So let's see. So these are pheasant feathers on the left. Everybody has seen the computer circuit boards?
Hold on a sec, we're gonna, oh, I thought you
That'll go around town.
all right.
What's the hardest pen to turn?
The aluminum. So if you're going to do it, you want to use the wood technique of using a 55 degree bevel that you're going to be into it. And another thing that you will want to do is if you just need to lubricate it at all to make the turn, just spray it with WD-40. And so I'll cut it, I'll spray it with WD-40, I'll cut it, I'll spray it with WD-40, and then I'll buff it out with Mother's. And I apologize that it's a little dull because I've been passing it around, but if I just throw a little bit of Mother's on there, it's going to shine up perfectly. So on your left is pheasant feathers, our pheasant feathers. You've probably all seen the computer circuit boards. Computer circuit boards, you can get that blank anywhere. You can get it at Woodcraft, you can get it at Rockler. The pheasant feathers, you can either cast them, or another blatant commercial is Exotic Blanks. Ed Brown runs Exotic Blanks, and it's a friend of mine. His stuff is phenomenal. The pheasant feathers are done by John Underhill, who lives out in Ottawa, out here in Illinois. His work is phenomenal on that one. Deer antler, and you can see when we do a little bit of this, I try to use a little bit, I try to leave some of the bark, if you will, on my deer antler. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try to find the deer antler. So how many people do deer antler? The deer antler to me that looks great is the deer antler where you can leave, as you can see on this picture. Let's do this. Look at this. See where I left some of the bark on there? Some of the outside bark? The hardest thing to do is to drill it to get it to do that. And so I don't drill on a drill press when I'm doing my deer antler. So I'm going to pass this piece around and you can see I got it really, really close to the edge. How do I drill? Is I take my blank, I mark off, I put my blank over here, I mark off this edge, I rotate it, mark off this edge, this edge. This is a pen disassembly tool that you can get at Penn State. But you know what? It works great like this. So I'll take the blank, I'll hold it like this in there. And so now I can get really close to the edge, right? And I got a little crosshair that I got marked in here. I'll put a live center in here. I'll hold it up to here. I got my Jacobs chuck into here with a brad point bit. And then all I got to do is crank this in, and it's going to do all my drilling for me. And as long as I start the brad point bit on that first X, and I start my live center on this X that's out here, and can you see how close to the edge that I am? It's got to go straight. The bit has to go straight through there. So I'm not going to blow it out ever. And so I'll just keep turning this, turning this, turning this. I've got a little mark on my lathe so I know just before I'm going to get to my drill press. And so that the last part of it I will just push through. But I'll pass both of these things around. But on this blank, you can see how close to the edge that I got. And that gets me that, if we go back to the monitor, that I'm still getting my bark. I'm still getting some of that bark on there. Once again, that's the character. That's what people are going to buy. If you take normal deer antler and you turn it down to white, it's not a lot there. You want something, I'm going to use the phrase sexy. You want something that's sexy. It's going to be the bark that's on there. It's going to be the coloring that's in there.
Are there also marked different parts of the antler that work better?
Yes, great point. Everybody thinks that you want to get the biggest piece of antler. If you get a really big piece of antler and you cut in the middle, that's the most porous part. And then when you turn it down, it's really the ugliest part. So what I'll do is I'll either get the small deer antler on the younger ones, or what I'll do is I will offset drill it. Like that piece that's going around, you can tell that I offset drilled it because I sliced it. And I took off the porous part that I didn't want, so then that way I could hold it in there when I was doing my turn. And then that way I get more on the outside edge, and I'm getting something that's more stable. The steampunk penny, I think I passed this one around already, right? Did it come back up? Rattlesnake skin on the other side. Remember there was a trend for all you woodturners, pen turners who did coffee bean blanks? And so those were real popular. I hated doing them. And it's the one time that I'm going to tell you, I lied to you earlier. Remember that I said pressure side to side, pressure side to side? That will not work with a coffee bean blank. If you're going to do a coffee bean blank, either use the square edge of the easy wood turning tools that have the square thing and just push it in and step it in, or, and I'm going to watch the real turners in here cringe, right? Take a skew chisel, put it on flat so it's on the side. You ostensibly got a negative rake scraper and stair step it in. You're going to get a lot. When you're doing it side to side on a coffee bean, you're going to cut it this way and you're going to cut it that way. I've got twice as many chances of breaking the bean out. When I'm pushing it in, I'm only getting it one way, and I only got half as many chances of breaking that bean out. So if people still do these beans, if you want to do the bean, stair step it in. Glass carbon fiber looks great. It's more segmented work. So now I'm going to talk more about the feature part of it, and we're going to get to this real quick, is turning acrylics. So you're going to do basically the same thing. I'm going to turn it, I'm going to drill it, I'm going to cut it, I'm going to use a jig, but I'm going to paint it. And this is really, really important when you're doing acrylics. So after I drill the hole in my blank, so you want to go back to this thing? I'm going to paint the inside of the blank. So believe it or not, these three pens are all out of these three things are all out of the same kit, out of the same blank. This is the blank that's in the middle. This is when I paint it white on the inside, and this is when I paint it black on the inside. And so one of the things people ask is, do you paint the tube or do you paint the hole? I paint the hole. And the reason being is if you paint the tube, there's still glue on top of the tube, and then you'll see the blank. It's gonna color through. If I paint the hole, I'm not gonna have that problem. One of the things though that I'm gonna tell you is if you're gonna paint the hole, what should you do? Drill the hole bigger. Because then when you push your tube in, you're not gonna cut it all up. So everybody turns a 7mm pen and you drill it with a 7mm drill bit. Don't. Use 9/32. 9/32 is just a hair bigger than 7mm. Then when I paint the tube on the inside, when I paint the hole on the inside, I can push the tube in and I'm not gonna scrape that thing up. So I'll over drill. I don't really have a problem with the 10.5s and 12s, but on the 7mm, I was killing myself trying not to scrape that thing up when I was pushing it in. So this is the same pen, all done the same way. The other thing is I use testers, model paint. You can paint a million different ways. You can paint all the different colors. I only paint two. I either paint it white or I paint it black. So these are those going around.
How do you paint it? Do you just fill up the hole and let it drain out? Or?
No, I use a Q-tip. Actually, she's not here. Yeah, she's not here, so I can tell you the truth. My wife does all my painting for me. My wife runs my business, so she does all the business part of the company for me. She does all the show preparation for me, and she turns keychains, styluses, and necklaces. So she's helped me out, and she'll do all my painting.
This is the same lady who you steal her bleach.
Yep.
You use her oven to cook these things.
Uh-huh.
And, man, you got
winner
a
there.
you got a
And
good woman.
I got a whole basement. You should see my workshop. I
Keeper.
got a whole basement set up for this one. So this is the same thing. I'm going to pass around purple. This is the blank that's next to it. This is it painted white. This is it painted black. And I love the way you get the black to change color on there. Okay?
Hey, Mark, you ever do Corrigan?
Corian?
Yeah.
Yes. Anybody who wants to use Corian, I can, at the end of the month, stop by, let me know. I go up, I do a show in Rhinelander every year, and the guy always gives me literally 200 pounds of Corian that I can't get rid of. I bring it home and I give it away. So yes, I use Corian, I've done Corian. If you want Corian, catch me after October and I'll have 200 pounds of Corian. I typically give it away to Rossio or someone and I let him do it, but I've done Corian. The one that I like to do is I've got the red and, once again, because it's a conversation piece, I've got a piece that's red, black, and white speckled, and it's the Corian countertop from Red Robin. And so it's a great conversation piece. I say, have you ever eaten at Red Robin? This is the Corian material that's in the restaurants.
Is it because the Corian's just hard material?
Yeah, and Corian's great for that. So, can we, the biggest problem with Corian though is it's typically not dimensional. It's really, really thin. So it's a great one to laminate on. Can we go back to the
Look, Tom.
So I only got 2 more topics, so I want to make sure that so any questions so far? Have you guys? So if there's anything I can steer quickly, I can. Are you guys getting out of this what you want?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's great. Thank you.
All right. So the question came up earlier. Why don't I use a mill on here? And what I find is it's not necessarily the acrylic. It's what I've encased in the acrylic. So if I've got postage stamps, that blade will catch that postage stamp and twist it. If I've done I'm gonna pass these around. I prefer you keep them in a bag, only because I don't want a lot of oils on here. These are snakeskin, and if that blade catches the snakeskin, it's gonna tear it. So if it's a pure acrylic, I might get away with using the mill, but I do a lot more where I've got pictures in there, or I've got aluminum tape in there, or I've got something in there. So when I'm doing that, I typically will then sand it, and you can see the sanding jig. And it's not real complicated. The nice thing about it is there's a brass tube in there, and I didn't bring it, or a steel tube that's in there. If you ever break a pen blank, save it, and then what you do is you can turn it. You can take the 7mm, which lines up perfectly on here, and then if you've got a 12mm blank that you're trying to put on here, turn the 7mm part that you broke down so that it fits in the brass tube, and then just use that as a sleeve. You don't have to buy all those sleeves. Those steel sleeves are expensive, relatively speaking. I just use a piece of wood that I chipped up at some point, and I've got a whole bunch that are on 7mm, and then I get them to where I want them. So once again, if you're doing an alternative material, once again, tools sharp as they go, side-to-side cutting, skew chisel, gouge, use anything you want. Here's what I find. Anybody who's done this, and especially if you use like the acrylic materials, they chip out. And I think one of the tendencies, especially the beginning turner who's doing acrylic, tries to turn that out. So you're going to put the tool in again, and you're going to make your cut again, and you're going to catch that same spot, and you're going to chip it more. So it's not how you got to the process, it's what it looks like when it's done, and what's that story, once again, right? So nobody cares what I did to get to that process. What they're looking for is the story on what that pen looks like, right? So you know what? Don't be embarrassed. If you get a chip in there, sand it out. Take a piece of 80 grit sandpaper, sand that chip out, and now continue your cutting. So get rid of that sharp edge so you don't grab that sharp edge with that tool again. So as you can see here, I say sand out your mistakes. Paper smooth, finish, I do everything the exact same. I do as I said, I finish the ends on my pens. So I will take it off the mandrel and I'll buff the end on each one of those. I use my finish of my preferred finish is the Novus system, and I know people use any kind of car wax on there, stuff like that. I find the Novus 1 and 2 is perfect, and if you're looking for this is one of the times I'll tell you don't go to a Rockler or a Woodcraft on here. You could get the Novus polish for half the price if you get it at the Container Store. And they use it on all their plastic things like this to knock out scratches. It is literally half the price that you get it for at Rockler. I love Rockler, I love Woodcraft, I buy all their stuff. The Novus stuff is literally half the price if you buy it at the Container Store. And then I buff it all out.
And what's that acrylic polish you said?
Yeah, it's my finish for putting on acrylics.
And this one here, the yellow was done with a black tint or paint inside?
Yes. Yep, if it's the black one, it's painted black, and if it's the light one, it's painted white. Deer antler, I do it the exact same way. I finish it with super glue, inlay work. Inlay work. Anybody ever do an inlay pen? All right, I do the inlay pens, and I just don't have. The Stars and Stripe inlay pen is 50 stars. 50 stars on there, 13 stripes. It's a great story because you have to explain to them that I had to do 51 pieces that are in there. I use a ball peen hammer to knock in every one of my stars, right? So I started doing that, and I thought I've done this for 15 years. I'm really good at this. I'm gonna take out my skew chisel and I'm gonna shave it down. And I did it once, and I thought I was king of the world. And then the next time I tried to do it, it caught on one of those, splintered the whole thing, and away it goes. So I am not embarrassed to tell you that I use the 80 grit tool. And what is that? I put it on the mandrel, I spin it as fast as I can, I take 80 grit sandpaper, I sand it down till it's really flat, and then I go to my tools. So I get rid of all the lumps and all the imperfections and where the stars are hanging up using 80 grit sandpaper because I'm not embarrassed about it. And then when I get it perfectly flat, then I'll go back to my tools. I'll either use a skew chisel if I'm going to do that one, or I'll do my gouge, and I do it all the way through that. So I'm not embarrassed that I tell you that I use that tool. Finishing on those, you will get, so remember I said real early that when you're sanding, you're going to get two different shades. So if you do the maple, and next to it's the red, and you got the white, you will get bleed over if you press too hard on sanding. So what you want to do is put a coat of super glue over it, and then sand. And don't worry this as you're sanding it down. You don't have to worry at this point if you burn through that super glue. You're actually burning through it a little bit, but that super glue is in some of the grain, so that I'm still sanding it down to where I want. Then when I get it down to where I want, then I'll go through my final finish with real super glue, but I'll use super glue as basically a barrier so that I don't get the red spilling into the white. So I'm trying to give you everything that I know. I'm giving you 20 years of mistakes, actually, as opposed to 20 years of knowledge. These are 20 years of mistakes. Oh, this is my favorite, one of my favorite pens. Anybody who's into Van Halen? I was into Van Halen, so this is the Van Halen. On the left is the Van Halen guitar. On the right is my pen with pickguard material. It's literally black pickguard material, white pickguard material, cutting it at a whole bunch of different angles, and I made my Van Halen pen. This is the Marine Corps pen. I'll pass this one around. It's a Marine Corps walking medallion that you get at Amazon.com for walking sticks. Once again, it's steampunk, so it's that industrial dirty look there. 50 caliber bullets, stamps. I got stamps up here. I got stickers up here. I got carbon fiber, snake. The watch parts is up here. Alligator jawbone. This makes an incredibly great conversation piece. So I'll take the little piece of jawbone that I want. I'll cut out a section in here. I'll put it in that mold that I originally passed around when I was passing around my molds. And then I'll put acrylic in here. I'll color the acrylic, typically black. And then there'll be little chunks in here. It's a great thing. So when kids come up, you go, hey, what is it? Now I got the parents standing behind me as I'm quizzing the kids. A lot of crafters don't like when kids are in their booth. I love it because I can talk to them, and the parents kind of have their ear there. And then when I start talking about alligator skin, or I talk about rattlesnake skin, or I talk about deer antler, hey, Bob's a hunter. This is it. This is the piece that I want. So alligator jawbone's a great thing to do.
So the, like this Marine Corps pen and the one with the penny, so do you set that in a mold? And
Yep.
pour?
Yep. If you give me 5 more minutes, I'm going to be done that one. Casting ideas, stamps. Closed end pen, which someone asked about. I like to joke that I'm the carrot top of pen turning because you can see I'm like a prop comic. I have every single prop known to man. So closed end pen mill. This is the way to do it. I did it all the other ways that you could do it before, and now that Penn State sells this closed end pen mill, you drill a hole that's basically the size of the tube that you're going to be putting in here. You put a little end on there, and then when you tighten this up, there's a little piece of plastic tubing that's in there. It's crunching that plastic tubing up. It's making that plastic tubing expand, and this is on there solid. So I'll put this mandrel in my chuck. I'll put a live center in here just to make sure that I got it straight out and the way I'm going to do it. This one I'm going to unfortunately pass around the other way because that's where the question came up with.
That's what we did.
Okay, so that's how I do my closed end pen work. So clear casting. Okay, so let me do the demo, and then we're going to talk about. Let me do my cutting demo, and then I'll do casting right after that. So I want to talk a little bit how I turn acrylic. And if you want to go to the camera, we can go to the camera.
What size length do you turn your pens out?
I got a smaller delta. I got a delta mid, with a midi. So it's like that. It's 25 years old. I got it at Woodcraft when Woodcraft still had a store out on 95th and Roberts Road.
All right.
Yeah. Joe sold it to me. If anybody who knows Woodcraft, everybody knows Joe. So
Just a
Joe
little
sold it.
history on that. The Hickory Hills Woodworkers started at
Yeah.
that store, and so did the Suburban Woodturners, which is now Windy City, within months of each other.
So hopefully we're going to do a demo here, and this is going to come out looking fantastic. Thanks. So before I know which one of these is sharp, then I'll pass the other one around. So I said when we do wood, right? 55 degree edge on there. I showed you every way of doing it. You're always going to do it the way you always do. You're going to reduce the bevel. You're going to try to rub the bevel. On a pen, there's really not a lot of bevel to be running, right? So you're gonna turn it the same way that you normally would. You're gonna stick the tool in, you're gonna turn it. You're gonna stick the tool in, you're gonna turn it. You're gonna round it down. On acrylic, that's not what we're gonna do. So on acrylic, I've got a 40 degree. This is an incredibly aggressive I would not do any other spindle turning with this thing because it's incredibly aggressive. And so, you're going to see here, I'm going to show you what I think most people do. And so I think, let's see, that's about right. Normally I turn it as fast as I can. This is kind of slow. I turn it at 3,000 RPM on my other one. But most people start with the wood turning technique. Right? And hopefully you'll be able to see this. The finish on here is horrible, right? Can you see how cratered that is? And I've seen, I can tell you, I know for a fact that I've seen people go, don't worry about it, we're going to catch it later with a skew chisel, we're going to clean it all up. Anybody who's ever done flat work and goes, I'm going to clean it up when I get to the end, that just doesn't work. So a lot of people turn this way when you turn acrylic. This is obviously an over dramatization because I used too aggressive of a turn on here, but most people get this crater. I'm going to turn it now the way I turn it. And hopefully, if this works out well, we're going to see that I'm going to ribbon this thing. And I'm going to get it perfectly ribboned across. But, once again, and be ready for all the professional wood turners in here, you're going to cringe because I'm not going to rub the bevel. I'm basically going to use just on here a little piece of between these two, where my two fingers are. And I'm going to get it, I'm going to catch the edge, I'm going to introduce the tool at a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to catch it just on here, and I'm going to turn it through that way. Yeah, basically it's going to be a point skew. Oh. So I got to switch glasses because I now have reading glasses purpose-built for doing this. So I can actually now see what I'm going to do. I can't see anybody sitting out there now, but I can see this blank. So, if you ask me, that's a really good cut. See the long ribbons that I've got out of here? And anybody wants to take 1 minute and come up here, you can take a look. Can you see the difference? Can you see the difference on that? And look how aggressive I am. I mean, within 2 turns, I could finish this blank. So everybody tells you it's got to be sharp tools, take small cuts, and especially when you're doing acrylic, you're going to take really small cuts. I just disproved that, right? I don't know what I'm taking. I'm probably taking at least 1/8 of an inch, and I'm cutting it down. And then the nice thing about it is, and if I had this at the highest speed, I could even go faster. But I can pick my cut up again. Basically, I'm unraveling.
It'd be good to mention, never grab those pieces around there with it running,
No.
or you may have your finger wrapped up right along with it.
No, you know what? But what does work is go to a golf shop and get yourself the small little brushes for cleaning your golf clubs and stuff, and just have one of those there. So, to the question earlier about the mandrel saver, when I am doing this, I'm putting a little bit more pressure. Sorry, I can't see anybody with these glasses on. So I don't know, I feel like I'm, Elmer Fudd or something. So if I can't see you, just smile or make fun of me now. But you can see within 1 turn, I took this thing down from this size, which is the blank that's next to it, down to here. And now I can show you that finding the end thing. So I'm gonna take this up, This one's actually kind of, we'll see how well this works, because I got a bad spot on here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just let the tool find the end, find my bushing, and pull it back. I'm going to introduce the tool at a big angle, find my bushing, and pull it back. Find my bushing, and pull it back. So once again, that's over dramatic from how I would have done it. But did you see the big thing that I wanted to show you is, first and foremost, when I made my cut, and the myth of turning acrylic is that you have to take really small little cuts. I didn't take a real small little cut. I took a pretty aggressive cut on here. I didn't rub the bevel, right? I made it a point. I made it basically a skew chisel, but I only used this little bit of a point that's on here. Then when I got it down to the end, what did I do? I gave myself support. So when I turned it in here, I found my edge. You saw that I introduced the tool at that angle, found my edge where I got the bushing, and then I rotated it back in. Then I turned my tool 45 degrees the other way, worked it until I found my end, and I turned my tool back into the cut that way. Now I had support for wherever I'm putting pressure. I can't chip this out. If I were to keep going this way and didn't have that, I would chip it out. It's just going to happen. I guarantee you will chip out acrylic if you do it that way. And so, as I said, I would probably do this a little bit higher speed. But I can catch it again. And you can see I'm pretty much there. If I want to flatten it out, the nice thing about it, I normally only cut one blank at a time. I put my mandrel real small and I only do one blank at a time. And I've got a tool rest that's only 3 inches. So, but I can, that way I can get the tool rest really close so you don't have this dangerous overhang that you're not supposed to ever have. So I'm not really sure how this is going to work. But you can see here, in essence, if you see it there as it progressed at the end, and I'm going to leave it right like this so you can see, I actually did this on purpose, you can see a semi-finished cut, an almost finished cut, and that first cut where I was just getting to where I wanted it to be. But all I did was I introduced the tool at a much bigger angle, and I was able to use the rest of this thing here. So I'll pass this around. Obviously it's really sharp and dangerous, so please don't stab your neighbor, unless you don't like your neighbor. So this is the same thing that way. So any questions on cutting acrylic? So you can see that's the difference. That's why I like to use, I couldn't do that with the 55-degree angle, because I don't have the room to cut that one. So,
I'm gonna kick your seat.
oh, I'm done. I'm not going to finish it. I want people to see, I want you to look at it. I want you to see how it started, where I'm at, and you can touch it. All right, so I want to get to one more topic. Do I have 5-10 more minutes? You okay?
Yeah.
All right, I want to get to casting because people have asked a lot about casting. All right?
Nobody wants to see that.
Casting!
You don't have a big enough pot for you, Bob. But now everyone, I'll make it work.
Thank you. Be safe.
Gotta go to work?
So here's casting.
Going to work.
Oh, I'm sorry. So here's some things that have cast. Not all of these are mine. The pheasant feather is not mine, and the picture is not mine, but the rest of the stuff is mine. Stamps, the carbon fiber, more stamps, Japanese paper. So here, I'll pass that around. So casting. To me, this is the most fun. So what I do is if I want to, here, and let's pass this one around. That's the stamp pen. So what I'll do to cast is to prepare my blank. I will paint the blank white, and then I'll put stamps on it. I always put my stamp, you know, whatever I'm working with. Stamps, the the steak skins, whatever I'm doing, I'll put them on at an angle. And then I'll get my blank to look to whatever I want it to look like. So, I'll pass these around here. I'll pass them to you first. So these are blanks that are ready to be casted, or ready for casting.
I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
This was 45 degrees,
40.
40. It comes like that?
No, I reground it that way.
Oh, you did the grinding on it?
Yeah. So I've got a Wolverine. I've got a
Yeah.
Wolverine jig, and I just grind it to 40. It came like the. They don't come like that. A spindle gouge will come.
Cambridge grind. Looks
Yeah,
like that.
a spindle gouge will typically come with a 50 or 55 degree angle.
Yeah.
And so that's, if you want to see that tool, I got it up here. That's the way they come. I return mine and get that 40 degree. And you can see if someone sees when they're getting passed around, some lucky person will have both of them. You'll see one's got a long fruit still left on it, one's been used for the better part of a year and a half. So, but I regrind them myself, and I regrind it down to 40 degrees. Any other question about anything of that stuff? All right, so what I'll do is I'll prepare the blanket, I'll do whatever I want. In the case of snakeskin, I'll glue the snakeskin on. In the case of stamps, I put the stamps on. In the case of the steampunk, believe it or not, the silver on the steampunk is aluminum duct tape. So I'll just take aluminum duct tape, I'll take a pounce wheel, and I'll roll the pounce wheel over it, and that's where you saw the rivets that are in there. Then I'll take little pieces of copper tape. So here, can we get this? So can you see the rivets that are in there?
Yep.
The rivets are just a pounce wheel. Get that at Michael's, the pounce wheel, right? The copper, same thing, pounce wheel. Get the copper tape, Amazon.com. Then I use ebonizing cream to get that black in there, and then I wipe the ebonizing cream off. Ebonizing cream, Michael's. You just rub it on there, you get it down to whatever you want, and then you rub it off. That gives me that dirty look that I want. To get my penny on there, where is my clipper? Ah, let's not worry about it. To get my penny, I take a piece of wood. The top on here is 12.5 millimeters, right? I'll take a piece of wood, I'll drill a hole 12.5 millimeters in there, take it on the bandsaw, cut it in half, so now I got half a moon, right? I'll find a punch that's about 12.5 millimeters. I'll lay it on there, put it in my drill press, slowly press it down, and that penny will naturally mold out. That's how I did the Marine Corps. Naturally molded it out and just slowly pressed the thing on there, so it had to take the form of pressing it around that piece. Then I encase it in acrylic. So, the mold started out like that. The mold that one thing that I will endorse, I get nothing out of it, but I highly recommend, are these molds. These molds are done by Fred Wisson, and it's P-Town Scooby, and it's on the side. If you're going to get into casting, these are the molds. These are the easiest way of doing it. So you can see here, I take my tube and the tubes that we're passing around. This one's ready to be cast, right? So this one is another steampunk, but with a Harley Davidson logo on there. Sorry, did you catch that one? So the Harley Davidson, it's a phenomenal thing. People love the Harley Davidson logo on the pens. So I'm going to make a steampunk Harley Davidson pen, right? So I'll put it in the mold. Then I'll take Silmar 41. So there's two different casting materials. Half the people cast with Alumilite. I cast with Silmar 41. Question is, why do I cast one way and everybody else casts the other way? When Alumilite first came out, they didn't have the crystal clear, and their clear wasn't as clear as I like the clear. And poly resin is way clearer than the way I like it. The only problem with the PR is it smells bad. And once again, my wife is very nice, and she doesn't mind that when I do it in the garage, she lets me do it in the garage. The garage is going to reek. But so I'll pour it in, and I got to warm it out, right? So I'll take my Silmar 41. UScomposites.net is where you buy the Silmar 41, and I pour it into a Snapple bottle, and then I'll just heat it up with a hot lamp. I'll put a hot lamp right above it, 100 watt, bulb above it, and I'll heat it up. So that gets it a lot more viscous. It's a lot thinner when I've got it, right? Then I simply pour it into the mold. So I fill up this mold up to the top where I've got it. I put it in a Harbor Freight pressure pot. And then I pressure the Harbor Freight pressure pot. People talk about 80, 90 degrees, 90 PSI, 80 PSI. And then they'll always say, but I warn you that Harbor Freight pressure pot's going to explode. I can't understand it. I pressure everything at 30 PSI. I don't understand why I would need to take it to 80. I'm pretty sure that if I got hit by something at 30 PSI, it's going to hurt. So I'm thinking 30 PSI is probably all I ever need. And so you saw the stuff that I passed around. I challenge you to find bubbles in there. I challenge you to come up here and find bubbles in any of this work. I find that just going at 30 PSI is more than enough pressure to get the bubbles out of it because I have warmed up that liquid to the point that it's very viscous and I can pour it in here without introducing. So I pour it slow, and I love these resin saver molds. So that's how I do that. So I sit them in the pressure for maybe 4 or 5 hours. It's about as long as I have to do it. Oh, the one thing, I told you I tell you absolutely everything that I tell you. There's one thing I'm going to not tell you, and here's why, is if you follow the directions. This is a chemical. Silmar 41 is a chemical, and it's probably a really dangerous chemical. I don't really know. I can't imagine if Homeland Security monitors my house because I get these chemicals, and I get the cactus juice, and I get glycerin, and I get chemicals to do patinas on platters and stuff like that. So if you follow, I'm not going to tell you not to follow the manufacturer's recommendation on this chemical, but wink, wink, hint, hint. If you put 10 drops per 2 ounces like it says, it's brittle and it's hard to turn. So I'm going to just kind of tell you, you may want to consider using less. But I don't want to tell you something that the manufacturer doesn't tell you. Manufacturer tells you to use 10 per. Feel free, it's going to be brittle. You saw what I could do on it when I turn it, and this stuff is clearly not brittle. So I use a lot less. Half. Use half. Alright? So I didn't tell you that officially, but that's what I did. So I use about half .MEK to build it up because I don't want it to become real brittle. So all I'll do is I'll pour it in here. Then the nice thing about it is there's plugs. So when I'm done, you just simply pull the plugs out of here and then tip this over and knock it down. I don't need mold release. If I'm using Silmar 41, I'll knock it down and they'll come out molded like the pieces that I turned around. Any questions on casting? All right, so I said I was going to answer a couple casting questions about there. Did I answer your questions? All right, can we go back to the slides and see where I'm at? I think I'm done. But I want to catch if there's anything else I missed. When you're casting, gloves are a must, eye protection is a must, ventilation is a must, and these are all legitimate things. Even when I'm turning, if I can give you one word of caution, and I probably shouldn't tell you that this happened, but it does. Even when I'm turning, I always wear a face shield. I didn't do it here because it's hard to talk, but I do wear a face shield. 6 months ago, a piece of acrylic flipped off and got in my eye. It was 2 hours of, and I've broken a collarbone, I've had mono, I've had 2 kidney stones, I've broken bones. That piece of acrylic in my eye was one of the most painful things that I had. So I always wear a face mask, so I didn't wear it here, but I always wear one because I don't want to talk. Material, we've talked about Silmar 41 versus aluminolite. If you're using Silmar 41, I've told you about applying pressure, I've told you about heat, I told you what kind of molds I use. If you're doing clear casting, these are the molds to use. If you're doing color casting where you're making your old blanks, somewhere around here hopefully is the blue mold that I passed around, so that's the other mold that you're on there. I get nothing out of it, but if you do buy from Fred, tell him you saw him at a demo, because it's just nice to let other people know where he's getting his leads out of it. So if you do go out and buy these, I promise you I get nothing out of it. But if you call Fred up, just say, hey, I saw a demo, and the guy from Chicago showed us this. I like his stuff. It's just a nice way to let him know. So his stuff's on here, Fred Wisson, www.pitonscooby.com. I went through the demo. Steampunk, I talked about the aluminum copper tape, how I get my riveting, how I get my ebonizing, how I bend my pennies. here's a picture of how I bend the penny. So I took a piece of 2x4, drilled my hole in it, cut it in half, found the right punch to put on there, put the penny on there, put the press over it, and slowly pull my drill press down until I bend my penny around there. Blank storage, other things, this is my last slide, I promise you. Other things that you want to consider, everybody asks about how you store blanks and stuff like this. This is just a shoebox. You get it at IKEA or you get it wherever you want, it's just for shoes. So it's a shoebox that I mounted on my wall, and I got all my blanks covered in there. Extra tubes are a must. I always, when I'm buying from Rich, I always buy, if I'm trying a new blank, or I'm trying something else, I buy 10 extra packs of just the tube. So then that way I can practice on that tube, I can do what I want, so extra tubes are a must. Bearing storage, now that I've turned 50, I seem to be getting a lot more pills in my life. So I keep the pill bottles and I store all my bushings in my pill bottles and I mark on top of it what I'm using. Instructions, I have a book of all my instructions that I'm at home. Believe it or not, guys actually do occasionally use instructions. So what I did was I went to Office Max and I've got a notebook, a 3-ring binder, and I bought those clear report folders in there, and I just slide every single instruction for the different pens I'm making in there, so I have a reference. So if I'm making a cigar pen, I can flip to that. If I'm doing a junior gent, I can flip to that. Websites, if you're getting into pen turning, first and foremost, if there's anything you want to ask me ever, you can ask me. You can get my, someone can give you out my email address, my cards are up here. My website is The Art of Pens. Feel free to ask me any question you want. I promise you that I don't hold anything back. I'm doing the same, unfortunately for you guys who are into the other clubs, I'm doing the same demo next month for Grundy, for their Woodturners, and then I'm doing it at Chicago Woodturning for August meeting. So if you're in the Chicago club, you may not have to come to this one if you don't want to come to see it again. But you can ask me any questions you want. And then if you're looking at websites, the best website that's out there is penturners.org. So one last thing I want to tell you about this technique when I was doing the technique up here, and I think this is just a cute story. I love your story. One of the best stories is this gentleman has a pen the Pope has. It's a great story, right?
Which one?
Then you say that the Pope has your pen.
Oh, the Pope has my pen.
Yes. So I said this, I forgot your name.
Jim.
Jim gave his pen to the Pope. I know Bobby Rahal has one of mine, so that's one of the stories. So someone said to me, I did this demo, there's a great, if you want to learn how to make pens, there's a great thing in April of every year. It's the Midwest Pen Turners. I went out and I did the demo here, and someone said, must have taken you a long time to be able to get that technique done. And I said, I'll bet you that it doesn't take a long time. And I literally took a 13-year-old girl from the crowd. She had turned one pen in her life. I put her hand up here, I put my hand over it, I showed her how to not do it the flat way that her dad had showed her. I showed her how to take it at a 45-degree angle. I held my hand over that pen, and we ribboned an acrylic pen just like we ribboned this pen. So it's not a hard technique, it just takes a little bit of practice. It would be one where that slow motion video of how it cuts would be phenomenal. But what I'm doing is just introducing just that little thing on there. So if you're doing a penturners.org is there. Here's my contact information. You can always get me at mg_Dreyer@yahoo.com. And if you're on International Pen Turners, it's mg Dreyer. Any questions? Did I see a hand back there?
Yes. Is there like a time limit that you set on yourself for making a certain kind of pen? We said I can make this pen and I should be able to make it in an hour and a half or 2 hours.
You know what? People ask me all the time, how long does it take to make a pen? And once again, no one at the show is gonna. If I tell you it's gonna take me 15 minutes, no one's gonna go. Yeah. But I can turn like this acrylic. I could probably turn this pen to be done with it in 15 minutes. But there's probably, so I say on average, my pens take me about an hour a piece to make. So, but as I said, I gang cut them. So it's a couple minutes there, a couple minutes painting them, a couple minutes gluing them, a couple minutes yelling at my wife.
You gotta count drying time.
Right. Could you please paint my blanks? Hey, you didn't get my blanks painted. She's painting 30 blanks tonight while I'm here. But then the other one that I have to tell people is that when I'm doing the casting, that it may be only a half hour to turn the pen, but there's probably an hour into making the mold and making the the pen or making the blank. So I tell people in general it's about an hour to make each pen. I think people seem to think that's a reasonable amount of time. But I do tell them, like on the Mickey Mouse pen that you'll see up here, that's weeks because I do drying time. I can't do it start to finish. I have to do it over days. I tell them, you know, to do the finish on my wood pens, takes me 3 nights at a minimum. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I tell people it averages about an hour for me. If I really wanted to fly, I could probably turn one of these out a lot quicker. But you know what? What fun is it to do things quick? So I tell, there's some women here, so I'm going to break the guy code. And I tell the story when I'm doing craft shows. If you saw my slimline pens, there's some sculpting to it, right? There's a figure 8 to it. And I know pure pen turners will look at that and go, it's supposed to be straight. It's supposed to be within 3/10,000ths of an inch. And you know, I'm going to caliper your bushings. You know what? There's no fun in that for me. As I said, I'm an engineer in real life. So breaking the guide code. Why do I do acrylics and why do I put curves in it? Because I like shiny things because I'm a guy and I'm simple. And I like things with curves. So my pens will typically have some sort of curve in them. The high-end stuff will be really straight, and I can do it really straight. But when I'm doing my other stuff, like Europeans, they barrel out. When I do the slim lines, I've got a figure 8. I like something that's got a curve into it because I can guarantee you that this is the conversation piece. A perfectly cut, straight piece of wood, when I go, it's within 6/10,000ths of an inch of the bushing. My market to sell that is 1 or 2 nerds like me who go, wow, 6/10,000ths of an inch. Nobody else knows whether that's even a big number or not. Right. So, you know what? Down here, and this is where my rolling technique works great because I'm not even going to get down to shading it there. So my pens have curves. And it's a judgment. There are other people who want it perfectly straight, and I admire that. It's not me. I want to do something that this is me. And when I'm at a show, if you guys are ever at a show with me, and we're both demoing or both showing, please stop by and show me because I guarantee you, and I will swear to you, that if someone's in my booth and they don't like what I'm doing, I will send them to a different booth because I would rather have them get what they want than buy from me. And I know you may not believe that, but that is literally what I'll do. So there are other wood turners that are out there that turn wood pens, and you'll see in my booths, I don't have a lot of wood. I'll send them somewhere else because of that. So if there's someone there and I know that they're looking at it, and it's a guy, any other wood turner who comes up and does this stuff, then I know what they're looking for. I'll send them somewhere else, and I don't have a problem with it. I like curves, so that's why I do what I do. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I don't know. How do you determine your pricing on your work?
I have single set pricing, so I don't change my pricing for different shows, and people do, and it drives me nuts. If I was a customer and I bought a pen and then I went to a different show and I saw that same pen for $5 less, $15 less, $20 less, it would kill me. I don't offer any discounts. The only time that I will offer a discount is if someone does 3 or 4 pens for me, I'll knock off their tax, but I don't offer any discounts because it's a piece of art and I want to protect believe it or not, I do want to protect anybody else who's bought from me. So when I determine my pricing, it's pretty simple. Slim lines, an acrylic slim line, a wood slim line start at about $25. European pens start at about $35. And junior gents start at $45. And that's single. That's a piece of acrylic or a piece of wood. If I'm doing something where I've done work involved, I kind of mentally count up the number of hours and I'll break it out. So two things I'm going to tell you, just kind of weird. I sell, for every $25 pen I sell a pen well over $100. So my pens, I'm not embarrassed about my pricing. So I have pens that'll be there $100, $125, $200, $300, all the way up to $500. And I'm not embarrassed. So you know what? I've had another turner say, how do you sell a $200 pen? And I ask them, how many $200 pens you got on display? And they'll say none. I'll go, well, you're never going to sell a $200 pen. Right? I mean, it's simple. If you don't have a $200 pen, you're not going to sell a $200 pen. So I look at how much work I've put into it, and I look at what skill level's involved with it. So doing the casting, I put a premium on that because casting is a lot harder. So if I'm doing a carbon fiber that I did on my own casting, you're probably not going to see any of my pens for under $100 for those things. So I don't know if I answered it. There is no set formula. A lot of people do double the materials. I don't sell on Etsy. I don't sell on eBay because if anybody knows me, and you've heard me say this probably 5 times already, and this is the 6th time I'm going to tell it, I can't tell a story on Etsy. I can't tell a story on eBay. I can tell a story on my own website, and I can tell a story when I'm selling it, when I'm talking to people. I don't even try to sell a pen to a person when they're up there. When I'm talking to them, the pen's going to sell itself. That's where I can sell my story, right? That's what they're going to buy is the story. So I don't sell on Etsy because then I'm competing with the guys who've got $15 pens on there, and it is what it is. I value my work. I know what it's worth. And we had a conversation earlier. People will come up and say, well, why is this not, what's different about it than a 25-cent big pen? That's a common question, right? And I'll say it's a piece of art. You can't question a piece of art. And I said it's a guaranteed conversation starter. And they'll go, well, how can you guarantee it's a conversation starter? Well, how do I guarantee it? You just came up to me and talked to me about it. So we just had a conversation about it. So I just guaranteed that it's a conversation starter. So I tell them it's a piece of art. And then, some people will walk away, and it's fine with me. And I always joke, and it's completely made in the United States. Your big pen comes from France. So if you want to go and you want to export your pen. That's fine with me. This is what I got. I'm not going to worry about it. For every person that comes in and asks me why it's cheap, I will get someone who will come in and say, I've seen other pen workers and you're underpricing yourself. I'm doing what I'm happy with. And this is a hobby for me. It keeps me going. I sell 300 to 400 pens a year. I do more than enough business that I can go on trips. I go, every year I go to the AAW and my company picks that up. It is a blatant commercial. I'm going to Chicago Woodturners because my company picks that up. It's my corporation. But I'm going to tell you this. Chicago Woodturners is, all these clubs are phenomenal. But that wood turning seminar, the Turn on Chicago, I went to it and I was kind of a casual turner. And I went because I wanted to see Malcolm Tibbetts because I wanted to learn how to do segmented turning. And when I was there, I saw Jimmy Clues. And I fell in love literally with wood turning when I saw Jimmy Clues do the turning. And he does those color rim stuff. And so I learned that by going to that seminar. So I went to that symposium. There was no pen turning guy there, but it's what gave me a passion to want to practice and hone my skills. So I know they talked about it earlier in the meeting. These clubs are phenomenal. Going to that seminar for $300 or $295, and I think they throw in a t-shirt on it, but you're never going to get a better deal than what you're going to learn at that one. And while he may not be really happy that I tell you this, much like the scholarship, I got a scholarship from Chicago Woodturners, and I used my scholarship to take a turning class out in Las Vegas. I don't know how many of you guys know Jimmy Clues or know of Jimmy Clues. So I went out there, and it was the time of my life. I got there, just tell you this quick story. I got there, and there were supposed to be 5 people in class. The 4 other guys called off a month before him. So it was just Jimmy and I for 3 days in his studio, and we did everything. It was just him and I. I learned more about turning in 3 days that I was there. We became friends. I did his website probably for him for a little over 2 years until work got me too bogged down with doing the real work. So seminars, some clubs are great, symposiums are great, and then if you ever get a shot to go and take a class, even if it's not pen turning or whatever it is, that's great. And I want to do one last commercial and if it's okay, I'm going to send you a thing. We're going to try to do a IAP. We're going to try to get a Chicago chapter set up at Woodcraft in Darien. And we're going to try to get people together there probably 3 or 4 times a year and just go over this stuff.